Now I'm going to be using the Perfect Photo Suite today as a standalone application, which means that I am starting inside Perfect Browse, where I'm going to browse for the photo that I'd like to edit. I'm going to go into Perfect Layers, and we're going to be talking a little bit about accessing different things inside Perfect Layers, and we'll be jumping back here into Browse. You can use Perfect Layers through Lightroom and Aperture. Now, Perfect Layers is a layered-based workflow program, so you do not have access to it through programs like Photoshop and Photoshop Elements, because both of those programs are layered-based workflow programs as well. So don't forget that if you are going through Photoshop, you have to save the file out as a PSD and then go into the Photo Suite separately. But if you're going through Lightroom or Aperture, you have a seamless transition from one to the other. So hopefully that makes sense. If you do have questions about compatibility, do not hesitate to ask, but I know that sometimes that can get a little bit confusing. Now we're going to start off with a super basic example, just so I can go over what the new tools are and what they do. All right, so let's take our image, and I'm going to click on Perfect Layers. I'm going to make sure I edit a copy. If you are going to access a layered-based workflow, your photo file type needs to be Photoshop. It can't be a TIFF file. I know that in Photoshop and Photoshop Elements, if you have a TIFF file, you have access to layers. Here inside the Photo Suite, we keep them separated. Photoshop files are the only ones that support a layered-based workflow. So we're going to make sure that we set that. It's also really important that if you're going to be doing a large amount of masking, cropping, or heavy adjustments, that you actually don't activate the Smart Photo re-editability. If you're going into Perfect Layers and you choose Smart Photo, you actually don't have access to a lot of the masking tools and the cropping tools that you would if you edit it as a plain photo. Now, one of the reasons why that hopefully this makes sense to you is creating a layered-based workflow with masks is like creating a smart photo. All of those masks and all of those layers, so long as it's a Photoshop file, will be saved. So you actually don't really need to have access to them, and hopefully that makes sense. We've got more information about smart photos up on our website too. We've got a whole slew of video tutorials for you guys. Now, once we've got our image, color, space, bit depth, resolution, those you can edit depending on your photo. We'll go ahead and click OK, and we will jump into layers. Now, when you come into this program, on the right-hand side of the screen, layers stack on the right-hand side, this little layers panel. This is where you're going to see all of the different layers that you use to create your composite. You've got a couple of different options right up at the top. You can adjust layer opacity and blending modes. If you've ever used Photoshop, you probably recognize both of these options here. You can also go down and do things like duplicate your layer. You can create new color fill layers. You can subtract and merge layers. All that information is right down below. On the left-hand side, you're going to find your tool well. We have our new quick mask tool. We have our basic masking brush, which is what comes with our perfect brush option. We also have our masking bug to create gradient-based masks. And then down below, we have our refinement tools, our refine brush, our chisel mask tool, and our blur mask tool. On the far left, we have the Files tab and the Extras tab. The Files tab is where you can go on your computer and access images of your choice to use as a background. So if I jump into this drop-down menu right up at the top, I'm going to choose my On1 software computer, and you'll see there is my desktop, which I will double-click to open up so we can take a look. I can use one of the photos that's on my desktop, or I can open up another folder of images. So these are a whole bunch of demo photos that are from that same folder we were just looking at, and I could choose a new background from here. You can also access the extras. These are On1 extras and extras that you can include in the suite when you get it. Now, the On1 extras category comes with backgrounds, borders, and textures. If we open up the backgrounds category, you'll see that there is a skies section, and we could choose a brand new sky that we might want to use instead of this really boring bland one. Now, remember, this is a pretty easy option. That's part of the reason why I showed it to you, so that these tools will be really obvious when they work. Now, I'm going to scroll down and let's choose a new sky. Here we go. When you find an image that you would like to use as a new background, a new sky, we have a ton of different backgrounds. There's indoor, outdoor, there's studio backdrops, there's inside buildings, there's outside buildings, all that kind of fun stuff. When you find an image that you want to add as a new background, just double click, and this dialog box will pop up. It's very similar to the one you saw earlier, but you're going to choose the bottom option, which is add as a layer. That means that we want to use this as a new layer to replace our boring sky. We'll go ahead and click OK. And it'll take up my screen, and I can move it around. On the left-hand side of the image in our tool well, right up at the top, is something called our transform tool. It's the furthest top tool. And what that does is it allows me to resize, move, rotate, fit this new background into where I need it to be. I don't need it over my entire image. I just need it over the top part. And you'll also notice that it's really big. I mean, I'm moving it around here and it's huge. So I need to shrink it down. You can actually zoom out by pressing Control or Command minus, and we can take a better look at how big this background is. And I can scoot it around, and then using the bounding box around the outside of where this sky layer is, I'm going to scoot it down into place. So we're just going to make it a little bit smaller here because it's way too big. And that's looking a lot better. Now, if you hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, you can size this background up and down without hurting the proportions of your layer. So what's happening now is even though I'm moving it up and down and resizing it, the proportions of this layer are staying exactly the same. If you let go of the Shift key, you can make it bigger, smaller, shorter, fatter, all that kind of stuff if you want to actually change the shape of the background itself. So maybe these clouds look like they're a little too, they originally look like maybe they were a little too wide across the image. I'm going to shorten them up a little bit manually. So I'm going to move these in so the clouds look a little bit fatter. And these are all adjustments that you can make now. You can make them later. So if you see the image with the new background and you don't think it looks quite right, you always have all of these options. As long as you save this as a PSD file, you will have access to readjusting this over and over and over again, which is great. Now, when you are done with the transform tool, make sure you hit the apply button in the top right-hand corner. That will save the change to that layer that you just made, and you'll see the updated layer information on the right-hand side. Now what we want to do is we want to put this new background behind our original image. So we're going to click and drag this layer underneath our New Zealand image. So now we can't actually see it. It's being hidden until we remove the boring background. Now, right on top is our photo. Let's go ahead and zoom back in there, and let's take a closer look at our image. On the left-hand side, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start out with our Quick Mask tool. Now, this is going to be the easiest tool that you can use. It is based primarily off of color information. Now, this is one of the things that I want to make sure that I explain to you guys. I'm going to show you a really bad example a little bit later, just so I can help hammer down what this tool is and how it works. The Quick Mask tool is looking at your image and it's trying to figure out where the colors are and where the edges of the color information is. So this image is a great example because there is obviously a very big color difference between the top, which is a very flat, dull gray, and the bottom, which is a much warmer, darker gray and a brighter green-yellow. So this is a very flat color. There's nothing there. Down below, we have a lot of colors. Even though the stone might look monochromatic, it actually is really warm. A lot of these stones had a little bit of rust and wear on them, and so they had a little bit of warmth in there. And then all of this information down below has all these beautiful kind of greens and yellows and blues. So the differentiation between our foreground and our background, what we want to remove and what we want to keep, is really, really important. If you have an image of a girl with blonde hair in a yellow shirt with kind of warmer yellowish skin, and she's up against a yellow backdrop, you're going to have a really, really difficult time removing the foreground from the background. And that's no matter what program you're using. So do remember that color differentiation is going to be one of the most important aspects of how these tools work. And again, we'll show you some more examples of this later. This is just a really easy one for you to help understand. So the way that the Quick Mask tool works is you go up to the tool options bar. It'll automatically set your mode to paint out, which means we want to paint out or remove an area of our image. Now, once that's set, you can adjust the size of the tool. If it needs to be bigger or smaller, that will be up to you. This is a pretty good size for this image. There isn't a lot of intricate work or areas that I need to get around. And we want to make sure that we click on all of the different color variations in one broad stroke. So if you have a sunset that you're trying to remove, you want to make sure that you go down to the bottom where maybe the brighter colors are and drag it up towards the top to where the darker, maybe different colors are. So you want to include a lot of the color information that you're trying to get rid of. So we are going to click and drag. It's going to go through and it's going to remove the bulk of the sky. Now, this sky is obviously very garish and very, in your face. We can change that later if we want, but I want you to be able to see how obvious it is, the new background here. Now, the mask itself updates on the right-hand side. Really basic, really easy. You can actually take a look at your mask in a more graphic view by going down to the bottom left-hand corner of your image, and there's a drop-down menu that says All Layers. Now, the All Layers drop-down menu, when you open it up, gives you the ability to take a look at your mask in different ways. One of my favorite is down at the bottom. It's called Mask Grayscale. Anywhere that's black is the part that we just removed. Anywhere that's white is the area that we saved, so the foreground with the rocks and the grass. You can also take a look using something called Mask Red, and this is my other favorite. This is a really good way to get very intricate with the edges of your mask because anywhere that has that red overlay is somewhere that's being removed. So you've got both of those options. It will depend on what type of mask you're creating, but I like the fact that you can take a look at that. Now, what we need to do is go in and clean up the edges of the mask. You'll see that even from pulled out, you can see that there's a little bit of leftover background that's being left around the edges. There's a little spot down here that just didn't get cut out, and another spot down there that didn't get cut out either. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you can do that. One of the first is called the Refine brush, and the Refine brush can only be used on masks that have already been created. I actually had someone ask me this question when I was at a show in New York a couple weeks ago, and they were really confused. You can't take the Refine brush and let's say that this background hadn't been removed yet. So, we still had the boring sky. You can't run the Refine brush along the edge of an object that you want to create a mask along. It does need to be used once you've already created a mask. So now that we've removed the bulk of our background, we can use the Refine brush. Now it pays attention to color information. So do make sure, again, that you've got some color differentiation. So no white dog on a white background, not really going to work very well. But we can go ahead and take a closer look at our image, and you'll see we've got a couple of little holes that we need to clean up. Now, the Refine brush pays attention to a little bit more than just color information. It also does pay attention to edges. It tries to find harsh edges. So it can work really well on hard edges like this one. Because it does base a lot of its information on color, it's also really great for getting into smaller areas like hair, or if you have a small little spot where someone's fabric might be a little bit sheer on a shirt, or the Refine brush is going to be great for that. So we can use this and click and drag it along the edge here just to help remove some of that excess that's being left behind. And all I'm doing is just clicking and dragging. And it's paying attention to all that information, and it's removing what I need. And I can click and drag, and maybe we'll want to run it along here, just to make sure that we clean up that edge right there. It's a little better. Now there's still information that we need to go through and remove. And I left that purposefully, I promise, because this is a problem that you're going to see a lot when you create masks, is this line of pixels. Now you can take your refine brush and run it along the edge, but as you saw, even along here where I ran that refine brush, there's still a little leftover pixel information from our background. That's when our chisel tool comes in handy. And the chisel tool does exactly what it sounds like. It chisels away a layer of pixels. So it's going to go in, and this big rock is the best way to see how the chisel tool works. It goes in, and let's select the tool. Up in the tool options bar, make sure the mode is set to remove. You want to remove pixels. You can adjust the size here depending on your photo. It's totally up to you, so I can make it bigger or smaller. And then the amount adjusts how much you're going to remove. So let's go ahead and take a really, really close look here so we can see the difference. So if we start out with a basic number like 8, and we click and drag, it's going to remove a really nice amount of that excess. So that's already looking better right there. If we lower the amount, let's go all the way down to maybe like 1 or 2. It's not going to remove quite as much, and it's going to leave a little bit more left over. Now, you can also go up. If you need to use and remove a lot more, you can do that. So now we're really cutting into the rock. This will all depend on what type of photo you're working on and how much haloing around the edge of your mask gets left behind. You can adjust depending on certain parts of your image. So maybe this side of the rock, we're going to want to use a much heavier amount. Maybe on the other side of the rock, we'll use a little bit less. It's all going to depend on your photo and what you're doing. So let's go ahead and that amount was way too much. Let's put it around 10, and let's just kind of click and drag to get rid of all of that little excess information there. And I'm going to use this across the entire image. It works really, really well as you go through, and I like to be very exact about this process. So I like to zoom in really close and make sure that I'm removing all of the parts that I want to remove. If I need to go in and be a little bit more specific about how much I'm getting rid of, then I can do that because I've got a much closer look at the edge of my mask over here. You'll see there's still a little bit of haloing on this side, so I'm just going to run it over one more time. And we're going to go through and just kind of get rid of a little bit more right there so that it looks a little bit better. And we'll click down here. Let's get rid of a little bit more down there as well. And we're much better. So these 3 tools, the quick mask tool, the refine brush, and the chisel tool, those are the 3 that I think I use the most when I'm creating masks like this one. These are the tools that are great for sky swaps, for quick studio background swaps, and a lot of, I would say, more basic masking needs. Now, the quick mask tool works great on all different types of photos, and the other 2 tools definitely work great, but the way that you just saw all 3 of them interact, I think are the best for removals of situations like this one, where you've got a bad sky, you've got a bad foreground, you've got, clouds you don't like, you've got something behind a tree, you've got, whatever the situation might be. These 3 tools combined in the way that you just watched them are awesome for images like this one. Now, the last thing that I want to mention as we're going through with this image, and we'll move on to another photo in just a moment, is one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're creating a mask is not blending the photos properly. This is a really, really great example of that. This foreground is a little dull now that we're seeing it up against a really bright background. So it doesn't really look like it's bright enough. It definitely could use a little bit more color. And the background is way too sharp. All of those clouds are really in focus. Now, if we take a look at the information for this image, which is up in the top right-hand corner, you can find that in the info pane. You'll see that this was shot at f7.1. Now, the foreground itself is in focus. You can definitely see all the information on those rocks. You can see the information in all of the flowers right in the foreground. But if we go over to the left-hand side, you'll see that the background is softening. It's fading out. That's what happens when you use a a lower number aperture. So a wider opening, but a lower number aperture like f7.1 or f2.8 or f5.6. When you're shooting landscapes like this one, a lot of times the background is going to be a little bit softer, a little bit blurry, like you can see right back here. So the sky itself is not blending very well with the information of this photo. I need to go in and edit it. And what's really wonderful about working with a layered-based workflow like we are here is I can edit both of these images separately. So this photo, our sky, which is skies 24, and the top copy, New Zealand 1, these are both separate. So let's go ahead and let's add a blur layer to the sky so that we can soften it and have it work a little bit better with our image. So to do that, select the layer of your choice. I clicked on skies. Go up to the top right-hand corner and choose whichever program you want to go into. So if you're working on a portrait, maybe you want to do some portrait editing on your foreground, or maybe you added in a new sky to a black and white image and you have to create it in black and white now. You can take it into black and white. Whatever it might be, go ahead and take your image into whatever program you want, but we're going to go into Perfect Effects. Now, on the left-hand side of Perfect Effects, this is where you're going to find all of the presets and the filters. This is where we'll find our blur layer that we're going to apply. You'll also see that the On One Favorite Looks are on the left, so you can access those if you'd like to. Now, down below is our Quick View browser. This is a good way to get a full screen view of what a filter is going to do to your image. On the right-hand side, you can stack multiple different filters together to create kind of a customized look. Your filter information can all be edited on the right in your filter options pane. So really basic information about Perfect Effects, but it's good kind of overview if you haven't used it that much. Let's go to the left-hand side to our filters library. And we've got two different filters we can use. There's blur, which is going to be a little bit more basic, and lens blur, which I think is going to work a little bit better for this image. So let's click open and let's take a look. Now, there are a whole bunch of really basic adjustments that we're taking a look at here. We can also go up and let's take a look at the blur category too. If you do want to access the Quick View browser, just jump down to the bottom of your screen and click on that little Quick View browser icon. I really like to do that because I'm going to click and make the thumbnails larger so I can take a bigger look at the filters that we can add. So there's different types of blurs that we can apply. There's motion blurs, there's kind of like a shake blur, there's a radial blur. If we jump back, we can take a look at some of those lens blur options. Let's go ahead and do that. So these are all different types of lens blur that we can create. Let's choose this one called Bokeh Small. And we'll click on it, and it'll add a little bit of that softness to the background. Now, we can make adjustments to this by going down to the filter options pane. We can adjust, for instance, the amount of blur. So let's just lower that down. We don't want it softened too much. We just want it softened a tiny bit so it's not quite as crisp and in focus. If we scroll down, you'll see down at the bottom, you can create highlight blooming to make all of the highlights in the background a little bit brighter. You can also adjust things like brightness and contrast. So if we want to brighten up the background a little bit, which I think would look really nice, we could do that. You can also adjust the vibrance and the contrast. So you can go down and you can add more or less contrast. And this will all depend on your image and how it's going to work. I'm going to lower the contrast just a tad because I think it's a little much. One of the other things that I think really helps combine two images together is also adjusting color. The background sky that you're seeing right now maybe isn't exactly the color that I'm looking for, so I can click the plus button in my filter stack, go over to the left-hand side of my screen, and open up the color enhancer. This is a really good way to make your skies maybe cooler. If you scroll down, there's an increase color, so if we want to pump up the color a little bit. There's a reduce color option if it's too intense. There's also a warmer option. Maybe we want to add more of a warm overlay instead of a cool overlay. Whatever it might be, you can go through and choose this, and it's a really good way to make things mesh a little bit better. So I'm going to click the cooler option. We're going to make it a little bit more green. And let's click apply down in the bottom right-hand corner. It's going to add these changes. And now we can take a look at our before and after sky. This is what we started out with. Doesn't really fit very well with our image. And this is what we created using Perfect Effects. It blends a lot better. It's a little bit softer, so it looks a little bit more realistic. And the colors mesh a little bit better than our original sky, which is a little too purple. So we can do the same thing with our foreground image too. We could take that into Perfect Effects. We could add some warmth to it. We could add some contrast, whatever it might be. We've got access to both of these depending on what our needs are. And when you are done, go down to the bottom right-hand corner and click on Save. That's going to save your image as a PSD with all of these different layers. Because I have my original sky and my new Perfect Effects copy sky, I can always go back to my original sky and start from scratch. I can add a new sky from the left-hand side. Lots of different changes that I can do. So let's go ahead and close out of this image here. And we're going to jump back into Browse. And let's talk about a photo that's going to be a lot harder to deal with. I know that this is an insanely easy image. A lot of people know that they could probably mask this really well. And I actually, here's another example. I masked out this photo. This is really easy. It's a pretty straight line. It's a very big distinction between the foreground and the background, and creating the new edit was really simple using the masking tools and adding in a new background. So those are going to be two really easy examples, but we've got others that have a little bit more information in the back that have things like frayed hair along the edges. That's something that can be really difficult to get around. And if let me scroll up a little bit. There we go. So we've got frayed hair. Hair is one of the most difficult things to edit out. Studio backdrops can be really difficult depending on the type of image. So we've got a gray background, but she's also wearing a grayish shirt. She's got kind of a bluish gray pair of overalls on. She's got a white cap. That's going to be a little bit more difficult to edit out. So I want to show you an example of an image that's going to be really difficult to mask so that you guys can kind of understand how these tools work a little bit better. So I've got this image here. I'm going to go ahead and open it up into layers. Let's edit a copy there and make sure we set it to Photoshop File, and we'll click OK. Now, one of the things that's really important to pay attention to is your color. When we look at this photo, I think the tights and the jacket are definitely a different color than the background. Awesome. However, there's a lot of kind of that skin color, that warm reddish orangey color that comes in skin, as well as the natural kind of warmer brown color of the hair. All of those warm tones are something that, if you pay close attention, you can see in the background of the image. So if we look at this photo, there's a lot of warm reds and oranges and yellows, which are very similar to what you're going to find in the subject's skin and the subject's hair. The boots right in the foreground, those are also red, and there's a lot of red in the leaves down here as well. This is going to be a lot harder to mask than other images. You're going to have to spend a lot more time on this. So let me show you what it's going to do if we mask out the background with the Quick Mask tool. So we're going to take our tool on the left-hand side. We're going to run it up and above, and it's going to mask out the entire image. I did this the other day, and I was really excited to show this in the mask webinar so that you guys could kind of understand how these tools work. Because the colors are starting to get much more similar, it's having a harder time differentiating between the foreground and the background. So this is going to be a tool that we're going to want to take a slightly different approach to. And let me show you a good way of doing that. So on the left-hand side, we're going to start out with our masking brush. And the masking brush itself works great as a basic way to remove the bulk of the background. This is a problem that I think a lot of people don't do right away. But instead of worrying about the fact that the Quick Mask tool is having a hard time here, let's go ahead and let's get rid of as much of the background as we want. So we're just going to click and drag over a large part of our background. Now, this is going to help us visualize, and I want to make sure that you guys kind of understand how that works. All we're doing here is we're making sure that we can see a better idea of where our mask is going to be. So let's make it a little bit smaller there, and let's get in and around our edges. Now, the tool that I think works really, really well in a situation like this is our perfect brush. Now, the perfect brush is a part of the masking brush. The one tool that we're using right now on the left-hand side has the option for the perfect brush. So if you hear us reference that from time to time, go up to the top of your tool options bar when you have the masking brush selected, and that's where the perfect brush resides. It's not a specialty brush that you're going to find on the left-hand side. It's an option that comes with the basic masking brush, which if we turn it off, it's just a basic brush tool. So it will cut through all the different areas that we want to cut through. Now, what the perfect brush does is it pays attention to color information and edges. So it's going to help us get into all of those tough spots that are a little bit harder for that quick mask tool to really see and understand. Now, it's up to you how much of that original background you do want to remove. So with this off, I could get a little bit more meticulous and get into the edges. This will be all up to you. Some people don't really want to do this. When I'm working on personal masks, a lot of times I'll get nice and close here so that I've got a better idea of again, what the edge of my mask is going to look like. So that's going to be up to you. But when we turn the perfect brush on, let's go ahead and do that. We're going to click and drag, and it's going to pay attention to color information around the edges of our mask. And it's looking for all of the different tones. It's looking for the warmer tones, like in the background right up here. Let's go ahead and zoom in so we can really see what's happening. It's looking for all of those different warm tones along the edge of the coat. And it's trying to cut out all of those little warmer tones, and it's trying to leave the tones that we want to keep. Now, a great way to use the perfect brush here is running it along the edge. When you're working on a more difficult mask, I highly recommend that you do this slowly and by hand. A lot of people think that our masking tools are just going to magically create a mask for you and everything is going to be awesome. And I really want to make sure that I point out the fact that a lot of the masks that I create, and I do this in my personal life. I'm a photographer. Outside of On One Software, I work here as an independent contractor part-time. And the rest of my life, I work as a professional retoucher and I work as a professional photographer. And I do a lot of weddings. I do a lot of engagement shoots. I do a lot of studio headshots where people want new backgrounds. And I do a lot of high-end retouching. And one of the things that people don't really understand is that there's no program that's going to magically mask out something that's really difficult. So the number one thing that I can say is even though this might take longer than 10 minutes, which the last image I could probably do in 15 minutes real fast, swap out that background, this is something that might take me about a half an hour because I'm going to be very meticulous about how all of these edges look. Now, if you do want something really easy, definitely pay better attention to the background that you're shooting on. I know that that's something that I've done in the last couple of years is I've started paying much closer attention to what my backgrounds are when I shoot my images so that I know exactly how my images are going to react with certain programs and certain tools. So this is working really well along the edges. It's going to be a lot more difficult when we get up close to the hand. But I'm still going to go through and I'm going to manually get rid of as much of this background as I can. Now with the perfect brush here, we're going to slowly go along the edges. When you do create a nice mask edge like we are here, so we're getting a much better edge, you can come in and clean up with the chisel tool. So there's still a little bit of leftover background here that we didn't quite remove. We can get in as close as we can with that perfect brush, but if we go accidentally too far, it's going to start paying attention to the information from our subject, and it's not going to end well. So my recommendation is when you do get up close to this edge, take your chisel tool and your refine brush and just clean up those edges a little bit. So now we can go in and let's chisel out maybe a little bit of edge here. go ahead and, oh, our chisel tool is really big. So we'll go in and we'll clean up that edge a little bit more. And we'll remove that last little bit of excess around the hand. I'm removing a little bit more than I should, but I want to make sure it's nice and obvious for you guys. And now we've got a much nicer edge than what we started with. So with a combination of just these tools, we're going to get a really nice mask. It's just going to take us a little bit longer. So I'm hoping that makes sense for you guys. This image is one that I actually did create a finished masked version of this, and it took me about, with editing in a new background and changing things like the tones of the subject and the tones of the new background, took me about 45 minutes. I went through, I did a really quick and dirty mask using that perfect brush and my chisel and refine tools. And I just did this little edge right here in about 5 minutes or so, but making sure that I was really, really meticulous about the new foreground and background took me about a half an hour, 45 minutes. And that's pretty typical with an image that starts out looking like the one that we just saw, where all of these different colors are warm, orangey, reddish tones, and they all blend together. So I'm not going to go through and mask this entire image because we don't have that much time left. So I do want to make sure that I point out a couple of other things for you guys. Hopefully that makes sense. Now let's go ahead and let's zoom back out here. All right. So one of the other things that I want to mention to you guys is working through hair. Hair is one of the most difficult things to work with. And I know that it drives a lot of people crazy. That's what the Refine brush and the Perfect brush are for. Their main job, their main reason for existence is, I truly believe, getting through difficult edges where you've got someone who has, this is such a good example over here. Her hair looks so nice right along the edge, but then there's like this little section that sticks out. She's got a lot of wispies up here. Now some of these I could retouch out real fast. But some of them I want to leave for a little bit more of a natural look. These are wedding images. I'm not going to do high-end retouching on a lot of these because they need to get edited really quickly so that they can get shipped off to clients. And I don't want to retouch every single photo meticulously because this girl had 7 bridesmaids, and that's a lot of images to retouch and a lot of girls to retouch. So the Refine brush is really built for situations like this one. So let's go ahead and let's jump over to the left. Before I show you the Refine brush, I want to show you a really cool way of adding in your own backgrounds. We have something called My Extras. These are backgrounds, borders, and textures that I can include in the suite of my own. So I can add in my own backgrounds from my own images. A lot of times searching for files through the Files tab can get really frustrating. Maybe they're on an external hard drive, so you won't have access to them. Whatever it might be, you can add in your own information and you can access your borders and your textures inside of Perfect Effects, which is really awesome. And then you can access your backgrounds here a lot easier inside Perfect Layers. So to add in your own extras, jump up to the File menu at the top of your screen when you're inside Layers. Scroll down to Manage Extras. It'll open up this dialog box and you'll see there's backgrounds, borders, textures down at the bottom. This is also a place where you can import your own presets or presets you might have downloaded from us and our website. But I'll click on the backgrounds category and click Import. And from here, I can choose images of my choice. So I have a little folder of Liz's backgrounds, which I'll open up. It's really nice. And I'll make an icon view so you guys can see some of these. But these are a whole bunch of backgrounds that I've created that I want to include. So let's go ahead and let's just, maybe we'll select 2 for now. We don't need to add in every single one of these. So we'll select a couple of images. We'll click Open. I need to place them in a category. If you click on Add Category, it actually pulls from the name of the folder those images are from. Because these are all in a folder called Liz's Backgrounds, it's going to use that, which is great. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Click OK one more time. It's going to process all of the images, and now I'll have access to them. This is a really great place, again, to add in your own borders, textures, and presets. So if I had a set of presets that I wanted to import, I could do that right now, which is really great. And when we click Close, we can go over and we can have access to My Extras. So that's a really nice aspect of working here inside layers and using the extras category. You don't have to, but it's a nice little option there. All right, so for this image, let's go ahead and add in a studio backdrop. These are going to be a little bit different. I'm going to use my Quick View browser here so that I get a better look at some of these. The Quick View browser is here inside layers as well as all of the other programs. So definitely utilize it as much as possible. We've got a lot of good ones in here, a lot of crazy ones. I think my favorite is down at the bottom, called Backdrop 36. It's a really nice, soft, subtle studio backdrop. Sometimes the brocade patterns and the grungy patterns I don't think work as well depending on the image. For this photo, I think that little soft backdrop 36 is going to work perfectly. So we'll go ahead and select it. We'll double click, add as a layer, and click OK. And bam, it's on my photo. Now, just like before, I'm going to select my transform tool. One of the great things about using the transform tool is right up in the tool options bar, there's this little box. It's called fill canvas. So you'll notice that if I zoom out, this background is bigger than my image. If I click the fill canvas tool, it automatically shrinks to fit with my underlying image. The other tools that you have access to is the ability to rotate and flip. So maybe I want the light part on the top. I'm going to click the flip vertically button, and now it's on the top. So those are some tools to just help the whole transform process work a little bit easier. We'll go ahead and click apply when we're done and zoom back in. Now we will click and drag our backdrop underneath our photo, select our original image, and let's go over and start out with the quick mask tool. We're going to click and drag over the green backdrop there. Let's get rid of some of the bulk of the backdrop. There's still a whole bunch that's left behind. What's really nice is because there's a good color difference here, it also went down and it did remove the information next to the sides of the dress on the left here, which is awesome. So that's a really good starting place for me. I don't have to go down and do that. And now what we need to do is clean up those edges. So we'll go ahead and jump up to the top here. Now, when you're working with something like the edge of hair, the edges of clothes, my favorite combinations are the Refine brush and the Perfect brush. The Perfect brush is awesome for instances like this. I can select my masking brush tool, turn the Perfect brush on, and let's go through and remove kind of the bulk of the excess color. So we can run this kind of around some of these edges here. And because it is based on color information, it's really good for getting into small little places. Like no one would really notice that little area right in between her hand and her arm. But if you're taking a closer look at the image, you're definitely going to see it. So that Perfect brush is great for that. And we can go over to the left-hand side and let's clean up that little area down below. And this little tiny green spot that would give us away if we didn't clean it out. One of the other really great aspects of the Perfect brush is that it can save and hold color information. So if we go over here, make sure that you hold the Command key on your keyboard and click on somewhere of color information that you want to remove. So I want to click on green. I'm going to click on a green area, and when I run it through, it's going to remove all of the green information that is related to the color that I chose. And as I run it through on other parts of the image, you see it's not picking up new color information from her hair. It saved that color information from the green backdrop. And I can click and I can use this multiple times. So let's click on maybe a darker area of green, and let's drag that through. It's going to save that darker area of green, and that's already looking a lot better. So the Command key is a great way to save color information and utilize it as best as possible. If you used to use the old version of Perfect Mask, this is a great way to replicate the keep and drop eyedropper tools. And you can use it across the board. So if I Command click on this part of the image, I can run it through all other parts of my photo. Now the Refine brush, we're going to go down and choose our Refine brush. We can use this along the edge of hair. So if we click and drag this along the edge of the hair, it's going to go through and it's going to try and remove as much green as possible. There's also an option right up at the top called color decontamination, and this helps reduce background spill color through transparent areas. Now, what it means by transparent are areas like wispy hairs, sheer fabrics, all that kind of information. When you have color that's really intense, like the background of this photo, you want to make sure that you remove as much as possible. The color decontamination, I think, helps a lot in instances like this one. We really want to get rid of as much of that color as possible, and it's going to go through and try and get rid of all traces of it. Now, one of the things that I do suggest is when you are finished using the Refine brush, definitely clean it up with the Chisel tool. It's a great way to just remove that last little teeny bit of color, and that will help clean up that edge a little bit more. So we're not going to do the entire mask, but with the combination of all of the tools, we can really clean up that edge right along the top of on the top of the girls' heads, and we're going to blend it a little bit better with our new background. So again, we don't have enough time to do the entire mask, but you can see we did an awesome job right along the top, and we can continue cleaning up those edges a little bit more with the help of our Refine brush, our Chisel tool, and our Perfect brush. So the combination of all of these tools combined together is what's really going to help you create a mask. Not one tool is going to work perfectly for every single image. Some tools, as you saw with the last photo, like the Quick Mask tool, it's not going to work on some photos at all. That last image with the girl standing in front of the field really didn't work at all. So we had to do everything from scratch, but we can still create a really great mask that way. If you've got the time and you've got the patience, you can definitely do it.